Every single time we were around family, she found a way to diminish me, to make me seem irrelevant, outdated, unnecessary. At family gatherings, she'd tell stories that painted me as foolish, as out of touch with reality. She'd mimic the way I spoke, exaggerating my slight accent until everyone laughed. When I'd offer to help with something, she'd wave me off with a dismissive, "No, we need someone who actually knows what they're doing." If you believe in standing up for yourself, hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I want to hear your thoughts on this. I tried to ignore it. I told myself that her words didn't matter, that I knew who I was and what I'd accomplished in my life. But words have power, especially when they're repeated over and over again, especially when they're said in front of people you love, people whose opinions matter to you. Slowly, insidiously, those words began to burrow into my mind like parasites, making me question myself, making me wonder if maybe she was right. Maybe I was just a foolish old man who didn't understand the modern world. Maybe I didn't belong in my own son's life anymore. The worst part, the absolute worst part, was watching Marcus stand by and let it happen. My son, the boy I raised to stand up for what's right, to protect the people he loved, just stood there silently while his fiancée verbally eviscerated me. Sometimes he'd give me an apologetic look, a shrug that said, "What can I do?" But he never said anything. He never told her to stop. He never defended me. And that hurt more than anything Victoria could ever say. I started avoiding family events. I'd make excuses, a headache, a doctor's appointment, tiredness. Anything to avoid being in the same room with her, to avoid the inevitable humiliation that would follow. My friends noticed I'd become withdrawn. My neighbors commented that they hardly saw me anymore. I was becoming a ghost in my own life, fading away piece by piece, and Victoria was holding the eraser. The wedding planning was a nightmare beyond description. They wanted a lavish ceremony, something that would make a statement. Victoria had dreams of a fairy tale wedding, and my son, desperate to make her happy, agreed to everything she wanted. The budget ballooned to $1.2 million. $1.2 million for a single day. The venue was a historic mansion with gardens that looked like they belonged in a European castle. The guest list exceeded 300 people. The dress alone cost more than some people's cars. And who was expected to pay for all of this? Me. As the father of the groom, tradition dictated that I should contribute substantially to the wedding costs. But Victoria didn't see it as a contribution. She saw it as her right, as something I owed her. She'd come to my house with binders full of plans, spreading them across my kitchen table like a general planning a military campaign, telling me what I'd be paying for, never asking, always telling. "You'll cover the venue and the catering," she'd say, not even looking up from her spreadsheet. "That's about $600,000. Marcus will handle the entertainment and photography. I'll take care of my dress and the flowers." She spoke about my money as if it were already hers, as if my entire life savings existed solely to fund her fantasy wedding. I wanted to say no. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to put my foot down, to tell her that this was madness, that no wedding should cost this much, that she was being unreasonable and entitled. But every time I opened my mouth to object, I'd see Marcus's face, hopeful and anxious, silently pleading with me not to cause problems. And I'd close my mouth and nod, agreeing to whatever she demanded, because I couldn't bear the thought of losing my son. But she knew how to push my buttons, and she did it effortlessly, with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. She knew exactly which words would cut the deepest, which comments would linger in my mind long after she'd left. "It's so generous of you to contribute," she'd say with a smile that never reached her eyes. "I know it must be hard at your age, giving away so much money. But don't worry, we'll make sure everyone knows how much you sacrificed. We'll mention it in the speeches." The implication was clear. I was old, my usefulness was measured only in the size of my bank account, and even my generosity would be turned into a public spectacle of my diminishment. There were moments when I caught glimpses of calculated cruelty in her actions that took my breath away. Once at a family brunch, she accidentally showed everyone a photo on her phone, a picture of me from earlier that morning when I'd answered the door in my bathrobe, my hair uncombed, my face still lined with sleep. "Isn't this adorable?" she'd said, laughing. "He's so cute when he first wakes up, like a confused little bear." Everyone laughed, and I felt my face burn with humiliation. I was being turned into a joke, a punchline, a source of amusement for my own family. She'd correct me in front of others, treating me like a child who didn't know any better. "Actually, that's not how that works," she'd say whenever I expressed an opinion on anything. "Let me explain it to you in simpler terms." The condescension dripped from every word, and each time it happened, I felt a little more of myself disappear. I was becoming invisible, a non-entity in my own family, and she was orchestrating it all with ruthless efficiency. The breaking point came at what was supposed to be a celebratory family dinner. It was 2 weeks before the wedding, and Victoria's parents had flown in from across the country. We were all gathered at Marcus's house, Victoria's choice of venue, of course, because she wanted to show off what they'd built together. The table was set beautifully, the food was catered from an expensive restaurant, and everything looked perfect on the surface. But I could feel the tension the moment I walked in. Victoria barely acknowledged my presence, giving me a tight smile before turning her attention back to her parents. Throughout the appetizers and the main course, she held court, talking about the wedding plans, describing every detail of the ceremony and reception as if she were narrating a film. Her parents hung on every word, and Marcus beamed with pride beside her. I tried to contribute to the conversation, to share a memory about Marcus's childhood that seemed relevant to something they were discussing. I got 3 sentences in before Victoria cut me off. "That's a lovely story," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "But we're talking about the future now, not dwelling on the past. The wedding is about Marcus and me moving forward together." The implication stung. I was the past, something to be moved on from, left behind. But I persisted. I suppose that was my mistake. Later in the evening, when they were discussing the honeymoon plans, I made a suggestion about a place I'd visited with my late wife, a beautiful coastal town that I thought they might enjoy. It was a genuine attempt to contribute something meaningful, to share a piece of my life that had brought me joy. Victoria's face went cold. She set down her wine glass with deliberate precision, and when she looked at me, her eyes were like chips of ice. "Do you mind?" she said, her voice low and dangerous. "This is our honeymoon we're planning. Our special time. We don't need suggestions from you about where we should go or what we should do. Frankly, your constant interference in our lives is becoming exhausting." The table went silent. Everyone stared at their plates, the air thick with uncomfortable tension. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, my face flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. But I stayed quiet, as I always did, swallowing the humiliation like bitter medicine. But Victoria wasn't done. She turned to Marcus, her voice rising slightly. "You need to talk to your father. This can't continue. I've been patient, I've been understanding, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my life having him hover over us, inserting himself into every aspect of our lives like he owns us." Marcus looked uncomfortable, caught between his fiancée and his father. "Victoria, he was just trying to help," he began, but she cut him off. "Help?" she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what you call it? I call it controlling. I call it manipulative. He can't let go, Marcus. He can't accept that you're an adult with your own life now. And honestly, after the wedding, I think we need to establish some serious boundaries. Maybe we should consider moving to another city, getting some distance." Something inside me snapped. 2 years of humiliation, 2 years of biting my tongue and swallowing my pride, 2 years of watching this woman systematically destroy my relationship with my son. It all came crashing down in that moment. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Boundaries," I said, my voice shaking but strong. "You want to talk about boundaries? You've been crossing every boundary imaginable since the day I met you. You've disrespected me, humiliated me, made me feel worthless in my own family. And I've taken it over and over again, because I didn't want to cause problems for my son. But this ends now." Victoria's eyes widened in surprise. She clearly hadn't expected me to fight back. For 2 years, I'd been the silent victim, the easy target, and she'd grown comfortable in her cruelty. But I wasn't that man anymore. Not in this moment. "Get out," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Get out of my house. This isn't your house, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. This is my son's house. But you're right about one thing. I am leaving. I turned to Marcus, seeing the confusion and distress on his face. Son, I love you. But I won't stand by and watch this woman destroy you the way she's tried to destroy me. You need to make a choice about what kind of man you want to be, what kind of marriage you want to have. Then I looked back at Victoria, and I spoke the words that had been building inside me for 2 years. And as for you, young lady, you might want to reconsider your behavior. Because the money you're counting on for that $1 million wedding? It's mine to give, and mine to take away. And right now, I'm thinking very carefully about whether I want to fund a celebration for someone who has shown me nothing but contempt. The silence that followed was deafening. I walked out of that house with my head held high for the first time in 2 years, my heart pounding, my hands trembling, but my spirit soaring. I had finally stood up for myself. I had finally drawn a line. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening over and over in my mind. Part of me felt triumphant, vindicated. But another part of me felt terrified. What had I done? Had I just destroyed my relationship with my son? Would Marcus choose Victoria over me? The question swirled in my mind like a storm, keeping me awake until the early hours of the morning. The next day, I made a decision. It wasn't impulsive or driven by anger. It was calculated, deliberate, and necessary. I called my lawyer and arranged a meeting. Then I called the wedding venue and several of the vendors. By the end of the day, I had canceled my financial commitment to the wedding. Every payment I had made was withdrawn where possible, and every future payment was stopped. The $1.2 million dream wedding that Victoria had planned so meticulously was suddenly without its primary funding source. Then I called Marcus. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number, but I knew this conversation had to happen. When he answered, his voice was strained, tired. Dad, what's going on? Victoria said you threatened to pull out of the wedding. I didn't threaten, I interrupted quietly. I've done it. As of this morning, I've withdrawn all financial support for the wedding. The silence on the other end of the line was crushing. I could hear him breathing, could almost feel the shock radiating through the phone. Dad, you can't be serious. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Everything is planned, everything is booked. Then you and Victoria will need to figure out how to pay for it yourselves, I said, my voice steady despite the pain in my chest. Son, I love you more than anything in this world. But I won't be treated like garbage in my own family. I won't fund a wedding for someone who has spent 2 years trying to make me feel worthless. I deserve better than that. And frankly, so do you. This is insane. Marcus's voice rose, anger replacing shock. You're sabotaging my wedding because your feelings got hurt? Do you have any idea how selfish that is? How cruel. Those words cut deeper than any of Victoria's insults ever could. My own son, the boy I'd raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, was calling me selfish and cruel. But I knew if I backed down now, I'd never escape the prison Victoria had built around me. My feelings didn't just get hurt, Marcus. For 2 years, I've been systematically humiliated by the woman you claim to love. And you stood by and let it happen. You never defended me, never told her to stop, never even acknowledged that what she was doing was wrong. So ask yourself this, who's really being selfish here? The father who's finally standing up for himself, or the son who sacrificed his father's dignity for the sake of keeping his fiancée happy? There was a long pause. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was cold, distant. If you do this, there will be consequences. Victoria will never forgive you. Our relationship will never be the same. Our relationship hasn't been the same since the day you met her, I replied sadly. I've just been too afraid to admit it. I love you, son. But I can't keep sacrificing myself for your happiness when you're not willing to stand up for me. The money is withdrawn. If you want to marry Victoria, you'll find a way to do it without my money. And maybe, just maybe, you'll learn something about who she really is when things don't go exactly as she planned. I hung up before he could respond, before I could lose my nerve and take it all back. Then I sat in my chair and cried for the first time since my wife died. I cried for the relationship I'd lost with my son, for the years of humiliation I'd endured, for the future I'd imagined that would never come to pass. But beneath the tears, there was something else. Relief. Liberation. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. I had taken back control of my life. I had refused to be a victim any longer. And whatever consequences came from that decision, I would face them standing tall. The fallout was immediate and dramatic. Within hours, my phone started ringing. First, it was Marcus, calling repeatedly, leaving angry voicemails. Then Victoria's parents, demanding to know what kind of man would do this to his own son. Then various family members, some supportive, others horrified, all wanting to know what was happening. I didn't answer most of the calls. I needed time to process, to be sure of my decision, to prepare for what came next. But I did speak to my brother Thomas, who had watched the deterioration of my relationship with Marcus and Victoria with growing concern. "I'm proud of you," he said when I told him what I'd done. "That girl has been poisoned from the start, and everyone could see it except Marcus. You did the right thing." "Did I?" I asked, genuinely uncertain. "I've just destroyed my son's wedding. He may never speak to me again." "If he never speaks to you again because you refuse to let his fiancée treat you like garbage, then he's not the man you raised him to be," Thomas said firmly. "And honestly, maybe this is the wake-up call he needs. Maybe now he'll see her for who she really is." But I wasn't so sure. Love has a way of blinding us to the faults of those we care about. I knew that from experience. And Victoria had her hooks deep in my son. 3 days after I pulled the funding, Marcus showed up at my house. He looked terrible, exhausted, stressed, angry. We stood in my doorway, father and son, separated by a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. "The venue cancelled," he said flatly. "Without the deposit and the full payment, they gave our date to someone else. The caterer, the florist, the photographer, everyone is pulling out because we can't pay them. Victoria is devastated. Her parents are furious. And all of this is because you decided to throw a tantrum." "This isn't a tantrum, Marcus," I said wearily. "This is me finally standing up for myself after 2 years of abuse. Can you honestly tell me that Victoria has treated me with respect? Can you look me in the eye and say that her behavior toward me has been acceptable?" He couldn't. He looked away, his jaw clenched, and I had my answer. "I thought so," I said softly. "Son, I never wanted to hurt you. But I couldn't keep living the way I was living. I was disappearing, piece by piece, and nobody seemed to care. Not even you. What did you expect me to do?" he burst out. "She's the woman I love. I can't control everything she says or does." "I expected you to defend me," I said, and my voice broke. "Just once. I expected you to stand up and tell her that she couldn't talk to your father that way. I expected you to protect me the way I protected you your entire life. But you didn't. You chose her over me every single time, and I finally had to accept that." Marcus's face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, vulnerable and confused. "She's not a bad person, Dad. She's stressed, she's got a lot going on, and sometimes she says things she doesn't mean." "For 2 years?" I asked quietly. "She's been saying things she doesn't mean for 2 years? At what point does a pattern of behavior stop being mistakes and start being who someone really is?" He had no answer for that. We stood in silence for a long moment, and I could see the war happening behind his eyes, the struggle between what he wanted to believe and what he knew to be true. "I can't call off the wedding," he finally said. "I love her. Despite everything, I love her." "I know you do," I said. "And I'm not asking you to call it off. I'm just asking you to open your eyes and see her clearly. If you still want to marry her after that, find a way to do it. But do it with your own money, on your own terms. Don't build your marriage on a foundation of my humiliation." He left without another word, and I watched him drive away, wondering if I'd ever see him again. But something unexpected happened in the days that followed. Without the elaborate wedding to plan, without the pressure and the stress of managing a $1 million event, cracks began to appear in Marcus and Victoria's relationship. I heard about it through family members who were still speaking to me. The arguments grew more frequent and more intense. Victoria's true nature, which she'd kept somewhat disguised under the excitement of wedding planning, came out in full force when things didn't go her way. She blamed Marcus for not standing up to me. She blamed him for not having enough money to fund the wedding himself. She blamed him for everything, and the sweet, charming woman he'd fallen in love with revealed herself to be demanding, entitled, and cruel when she didn't get what she wanted. 2 weeks after the wedding was supposed to take place, Marcus showed up at my door again. This time, he looked different. Defeated, yes, but also somehow lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "The engagement is off," he said without preamble. "Victoria and we're done." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to cheer, to celebrate, but I could see the pain in my son's eyes, and my heart ached for him. "I'm sorry, son," I said, and I meant it. "I know you loved her." "I thought I did," he replied, shaking his head. But these past few weeks, without the wedding to distract us, I finally saw what everyone else had been seeing all along. "You were right, Dad. She wasn't just stressed or having a bad day. That's who she is. Demanding, controlling, cruel when she doesn't get her way. And I was so blinded by what I wanted her to be that I couldn't see what she actually was." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "I'm sorry. For not defending you, for letting her treat you that way, for choosing her over you again and again. You deserved better from me. You deserved so much better." I pulled my son into my arms and held him as he cried, the way I used to when he was a little boy with scraped knees and hurt feelings. And in that moment, I knew I'd made the right choice. Yes, it had been painful. Yes, it had cost us dearly. But sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that change everything for the better. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It isn't cruel. It's necessary. Because when you allow people to treat you as less than you are, when you accept humiliation and disrespect as the price of keeping peace, you lose yourself piece by piece until there's nothing left. And no relationship is worth that, not with a daughter-in-law, not with a friend, not even with your own child. I didn't stop that wedding to be vindictive. I didn't do it to hurt Marcus or to punish Victoria, though I won't pretend there wasn't a part of me that felt satisfied seeing her plans crumble. I did it because I had to save myself. I had to draw a line and say, this far and no further. I deserve respect. I deserve dignity. And I won't fund my own humiliation. It's been 6 months since all of this happened. Marcus and I are rebuilding our relationship, slowly and carefully. It's not the same as it was before Victoria. There are scars that will take time to heal, wounds that run deep. But it's honest now. He sees me as I am, not as someone who will endure anything to keep him happy. And I see him more clearly too, understanding that he's human and flawed, capable of making terrible choices just like anyone else. He's dating someone new now, a kind woman who works as a teacher. She's nothing like Victoria. She's warm and genuine, and most importantly, she treats me with respect. She asks about my life, listens when I speak, and includes me in their plans without making me feel like an obligation. When I mentioned this to Marcus, he smiled sadly and said, "I know the difference now, Dad. I know what real kindness looks like versus someone just playing a part. I don't know if they'll get married. I don't know if this relationship will last. But I do know that if Marcus ever asks me to contribute to another wedding, I'll evaluate it based on how I'm treated, not on tradition or obligation. I've learned that my dignity isn't negotiable, and my self-respect isn't for sale, not even to secure my son's happiness. There are still family members who think I was wrong, who believe I should have sucked it up and paid for the wedding regardless of how Victoria treated me. They say blood is thicker than water, that family should forgive and forget. But I've learned that blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to treat you like garbage. Family should be a source of support and love, not a weapon used to guilt you into accepting abuse. Sometimes I think about that night at the dinner table, when Victoria hissed at me to get out of her life. In a twisted way, She gave me permission to do exactly what I needed to do, to remove myself from a toxic situation, to prioritize my own well-being over keeping the peace. She thought she was dismissing me, discarding me like yesterday's trash. But instead, she freed me. And that freedom, that reclamation of my dignity and self-worth, was worth more than any wedding could ever be. It was worth the temporary loss of my relationship with my son. It was worth the family drama and the angry phone calls and the accusations of selfishness. Because at the end of the day, I have to live with myself. I have to look at myself in the mirror every morning. And I couldn't do that anymore while allowing someone to treat me as less than human. If you're in a situation where someone is systematically breaking you down, making you feel small and worthless, please hear what I'm saying. You have the right to stand up for yourself. You have the right to say no. You have the right to walk away from people who treat you with disrespect, even if they're about to become family, even if standing up for yourself causes conflict and difficulty. Your dignity is not something you owe to anyone. It's yours, and yours alone, and nobody has the right to take it from you. I learned that lesson at 64 years old, after 2 years of humiliation and heartbreak. Don't wait as long as I did. Don't sacrifice yourself on the altar of keeping peace. Because a peace built on your suffering is no peace at all, it's just a prettier name for surrender. The hardest choices are often the ones that change everything. Calling off that wedding, withdrawing my financial support, standing up to Victoria and accepting the potential loss of my relationship with my son, those were the hardest choices I've ever made. Harder than burying my wife. Harder than raising a child alone. Harder than anything I'd faced in 64 years of living. But they were also the choices that saved me. They reminded me that I am not just Marcus's father or Victoria's soon-to-be father-in-law. I am a person with value, with dignity, with the right to be treated with basic human respect. And anyone who can't offer me that doesn't deserve a place in my life, regardless of who they are or what role they play. So to anyone watching this, anyone who has felt what I felt, who has swallowed humiliation and convinced themselves it's not that bad, who has prioritized keeping others happy over their own well-being, it's time to stop. Draw your line. Stand your ground. Reclaim your dignity. The people who truly love you will respect that boundary. And the people who don't, they were never really there for you anyway. I'm 64 years old, and I finally understand something I should have learned decades ago. Self-respect isn't selfish. It's survival. And sometimes, the greatest act of love you can perform is refusing to accept anything less than what you deserve, even when that refusal comes at a terrible cost. Don't let anyone make you feel worthless. Don't let them take your dignity. Stand your ground, and never let them convince you that your pain doesn't matter. Because it does matter. You matter. And no wedding, no relationship, no promise of future happiness is worth the loss of yourself. That's my story. That's the truth of how I stopped $1 million wedding and saved my own life in the process. I don't regret it. Not for one single moment. Because I got something back that I thought I'd lost forever. Myself. And that's worth more than any amount of money, any celebration, any temporary peace built on the foundation of my own humiliation. Stand up for yourself. Always. No matter what. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe to Balike Stories, and turn on notifications to never miss an emotional journey.